Nobody forgets the nights when the Texas sky opens up and the rain comes in sheets, when the land glows with white fire and the air shakes with thunder. It was on one of those nights that everything changed for Samantha Evans, the quiet kid they called Sam, out on Dusty Creek Ranch. The house rattled with every rumble. Most folks huddled in the kitchen, sipping coffee, waiting for the storm to pass. But not Sam. She was restless, the kind of restless you feel when you know something out there is calling your name. Sam watched from her small bedroom window as lightning sketched jagged lines across the fields, making the whole ranch shimmer and vanish, like a ghost story told in strobe. She'd always felt more at home out with the horses than inside with people. Her uncle, big, gruff, never really knew what to do with a teenage girl, had let her stay since her mom died. But even after 2 years, Sam was still the city kid, the one who drew pictures in the barn and got caught reading by the fence posts instead of helping with the cattle. Tonight, though, something was different. Through the noise of the storm, Sam heard something shrill, animal, desperate. Not the usual wild dogs howling or the horses whinnying at thunder. This was sharper, panicked, and it set her nerves humming. She grabbed her flashlight and her old raincoat, shoving her boots on without socks, and slipped down the back stairs. The house was quiet. Her uncle and the ranch hands were probably arguing over cards, nobody noticing the wind rattling the barn doors. Sam didn't bother leaving a note. She just ducked her head and ran out into the wet, the cold rain drumming against her face. The air was full of electricity, the kind that makes every hair stand up. She could see almost nothing except for flashes: the barn, the fence lines, the tree at the edge of the pasture. Then she heard it again, closer, near the north fence where the wild land ran up against their property, the sound of a horse. But not just any horse. There was anger and terror in that cry. Sam cut across the muddy field, sliding more than running, the flashlight beam shaking in her hands. By the time she reached the fence line, the storm was right overhead. Lightning struck a fence post so close the ground shook, and for a split second, everything was lit up as bright as noon. That's when she saw them, a pack of coyotes, skinny and mean, their eyes like coals, circling something big and black pressed up against the barbed wire. The Mustang. She'd seen him before, wild and untouchable, jet black with a white star on his forehead. Shadow, the one the ranch hands joked about catching for rodeo money, the one Sam sometimes sketched in her notebook. The coyotes snapped and yipped, hungry and bold in the storm. Shadow was hurt. Sam could see blood on his flank, a long raw cut from the wire. But he was still fighting, kicking out, teeth bared. But there were too many of them, and he was tiring. Sam knew enough about coyotes to know they wouldn't back down easy, not with a storm hiding their noise. She looked around for a weapon. Her flashlight was heavy, but not much good. Then she saw a thick branch broken off from the last wind gust, half buried in mud. She snatched it up, splashed forward, and did the only thing she could think of. She started shouting, "Hey, get out of here! Go on, get!" She screamed and waved the stick, banging it against the fence. She remembered what the old wrangler used to say: "Sometimes you have to make yourself bigger than your fear." "Go! Get away!" The coyotes hesitated, snarling at the intrusion. Sam's heart hammered, her mouth full of rain, but she kept going, waving the flashlight, beam bouncing wildly. She could see Shadow's eyes, white with fear, rolling, but also fixed on her. For a terrifying moment, one coyote slipped through the fence, lunging low. Sam jabbed the stick at it, yelling as loud as she could. It darted back, tail down, But the rest stayed, torn between hunger and caution. Lightning crashed again, lighting up the world, and Sam's shadow loomed huge across the ground. Maybe it was enough. Maybe the noise and light tipped the scales. One by one, the coyotes slunk away, melting back into the brush, their eyes shining with anger. Sam dropped to her knees, soaked to the skin. She could hardly breathe, her arms shaking. She shone the light on Shadow, careful not to blind him. The horse stood tall, muscles trembling, blood mixing with the rain, watching her with the wild, distrustful stare of an animal who'd survived too much to ever trust easily. For a long minute, neither moved. The rain fell harder. Sam wanted to reach out, to tell Shadow he was safe now, but she didn't dare. She just knelt there, shivering, letting the horse see she meant no harm. In that moment, they were two outcasts in the storm. One human, one wild, both fighting to stay free. Finally, Shadow snorted, pawed the ground, and limped away, disappearing into the darkness. Sam stayed by the fence until her teeth chattered, afraid to move in case the coyotes came back. She knew she should go home. Her uncle would be furious if he found her out here. But she couldn't leave, not yet. She looked down at her muddy hands. The stick splintered from swinging, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something fierce and good burn in her chest. She'd done something that mattered. She'd stood up to the darkness, even if nobody would ever know. By the time she staggered back to the house, the storm had started to fade. She slipped inside, her boots leaving muddy tracks down the hall, and crawled under her blanket, heart still pounding. Out in the fields, somewhere, a wild black Mustang was still running free. And Sam, for the first time in months, felt a little less alone. The storm left a mess behind, as Texas storms always do. The next morning, Dusty Creek Ranch woke to a world washed clean but battered. Fences down, puddles in the pastures, the smell of rain and mud heavy in the air. Sam rolled out of bed late, feeling every bruise from her nighttime rescue, but with a strange energy humming inside her. For the first time in forever, she felt almost brave. She didn't get long to enjoy it. Downstairs, the kitchen was chaos. The hands were clustered by the window, voices sharp, faces drawn and tired. Her uncle, Frank Evans, was pacing, his boots muddy, his jaw clenched. Sam hovered in the doorway, hoping to slip out unseen and check on the horses. But the second she appeared, all eyes swung her way. "There she is!" barked Chet, the senior ranch hand, a man with permanent sunburn and a voice like gravel. "Sam, you been out last night?" Sam's mouth went dry. She saw muddy footprints on the tile, hers, stretching from the back door to the stairs. She'd forgotten to clean up. Her uncle's eyes narrowed. "Sam, what were you doing out after midnight?" Frank's tone wasn't angry yet. It was the careful, suspicious quiet that meant worse was coming. "And where's Thunderbolt?" The room fell silent. Thunderbolt, the prized chestnut stallion, was the pride of the ranch, worth more than all the yearlings put together. Sam's mind blanked for a second. She hadn't seen Thunderbolt. She'd only seen the wild Mustang, Shadow. But before she could answer, Chet jumped in. "Saw her sneaking out in the storm. Probably left the gates open. Wouldn't be the first time she was mooning over those wild horses. You know she's always wandering around, drawing 'em like some kind of horse whisperer." A couple of the younger ranch hands snickered. Sam felt her cheeks go hot. She tried to explain, tried to say she'd heard something by the fence, that she was worried about coyotes, but the words jammed up in her throat. Nobody wanted to listen. They wanted a scapegoat. "Thunderbolt's missing," Frank said grimly. "Gate by the wild pastures wide open. Fresh hoof prints lead out, not in. Coyotes prowling the fence. What do you have to say for yourself, Sam? Sam swallowed. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must hear it. I saw the Mustang. The black one. He was hurt. Coyotes were after him. I scared them off, but Thunderbolt, I didn't see him, I swear. Her voice trailed off as Frank's face hardened. Sam, I'm tired of your stories. We have rules for a reason. You keep sneaking out, getting lost in your daydreams, and now this. He pointed toward the muddy tracks. You're grounded. No more roaming the pastures. You help in the house, nowhere else, until further notice. And if Thunderbolt's hurt because of you... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The hands filed out to search the fields, leaving Sam standing alone, feeling smaller than ever. She watched her uncle's back as he walked out, his disappointment a heavy weight pressing her into the floor. Sam spent the rest of the morning staring out the kitchen window, forced to peel potatoes and wash dishes while the search parties scoured the ranch. Every so often, she'd catch glimpses of riders fanning out, their voices rising and falling as they called for Thunderbolt. She ached to be out there, to help, to explain, to prove she wasn't lying. But the words still wouldn't come. The house was colder than usual. Sam's cousin Lina came through the kitchen just once, giving her a look that was half pity, half suspicion. Nobody spoke to her except to snap orders. Sam chopped vegetables, her hands moving on autopilot, while her mind replayed the night before. Shadow's blood, the wild fear in his eyes, the storm making the world new and terrifying. By noon, the sky had cleared, but the tension inside only thickened. Sam's uncle came back muddy and grim, saying nothing as he scrubbed his boots clean at the door. The ranch hands ate lunch outside, talking in low voices. Chet kept shooting Sam looks like he was just waiting for her to slip up again. After lunch, Sam tried to lose herself in chores, but everywhere she turned, she felt the weight of judgment. Every squeaky floorboard, every muddy print seemed to accuse her. She kept thinking about Thunderbolt, about the way the ranch hands blamed her just because she was different, just because she cared about the wild horses, about things that didn't make money. She kept thinking about Shadow, too. Where was he now? Had the coyotes come back? Was he all right? That evening, her uncle called her out onto the porch as the sun set behind the cottonwoods. The world looked golden, peaceful, but Sam's insides were knotted tight. Sam, Frank said, leaning on the rail, his face unreadable, you got a big heart. I know you care about animals, but you gotta learn the rules out here. You can't just do as you please, not when people's livelihoods are on the line. We can't afford mistakes. Sam stared at her shoes, blinking fast. I didn't let Thunderbolt out, Uncle Frank, I promise. He sighed, a long, tired sound. I want to believe you, but you need to prove you can be trusted. No more sneaking out, you hear me? She nodded. She didn't trust her voice not to crack. After he went back inside, Sam sat on the porch swing, hugging her knees to her chest. The ranch was beautiful in the sunset, the fields stretching out to the purple horizon, the wild pasture where she'd saved Shadow just visible beyond the last fence line. She watched a pair of hawks circle, free as anything, and for a moment she wished she could just disappear into the sky with them. Inside, Lina played the radio too loud, drowning out any chance of quiet. Sam pulled her sketchbook from under the swing and began to draw. Rough, angry lines at first, then softer as she lost herself in the motion. She sketched Shadow as she remembered him, standing proud even while bleeding, facing down the storm and the coyotes. She drew the ranch, too, the fences and the barn and the long, lonely porch. When she finished, she felt lighter somehow, like she'd left a little bit of her fear and anger on the page. But the resolve in her chest had only grown stronger. Sam knew she'd done the right thing last night, even if nobody believed her. And she knew she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Somewhere out there, the wild Mustang she'd saved was still fighting for his life. And Sam Evans, for all her loneliness and all her mistakes, wasn't going to let him down. Sunrise always came soft to Dusty Creek, gilding the ranch in gold before the real heat rolled in. Sam woke before the rooster crowed, the last notes of a fitful dream fading from her mind. She lay for a while staring at the ceiling, listening to the ranch come alive. The whinny of horses in the main corral, the rumble of a truck starting somewhere out back, the faint sound of Lena singing in the kitchen, her uncle's words still echoed in her ears. No more roaming, no more sneaking out. Prove you can be trusted. But Sam couldn't just stay put. Not today. The memory of Shadow's wild, haunted eyes refused to let her rest. The whole night played on repeat. The storm, the coyotes, the strange, silent understanding she'd felt as she knelt in the mud facing the Mustang. She needed to see if he was still out there. She needed to know he'd made it. Sam moved quietly, slipping out of bed and pulling on jeans and her old faded sweatshirt, the one with a paint stain on the sleeve. She listened. No sounds from her uncle's room. With careful, practiced steps, she crept into the kitchen. A quick glance out the window confirmed what she hoped. The ranch hands were already out in the south field, checking the far fences after the storm. Sam grabbed 2 apples from the counter and filled a water jug at the sink, then ducked out the back door before anyone could spot her. Outside, the morning was cool and bright. Mist hung low over the pasture, swirling around her boots as she hurried toward the wild field. Every step felt like a secret. She stuck close to the fence, her heart pounding. She hoped the apples would lure Shadow, hoped the water would help if he was still bleeding. Sam climbed up to her favorite spot, an old wooden fence post beneath a big sycamore, half-shaded, perfect for watching the far edge of the pasture. She set the apples and the jug down on the grass and perched herself on the fence, pulling her sketchbook from her backpack. She always carried it, even when she knew her uncle would tease her about city kid habits. The pages were filled with horses, long-legged, wild-eyed, running free, captured in every mood and motion. Drawing helped her breathe, helped her slow down and see the world clearly. Sam waited, sketching quietly, humming an old tune her mother used to sing. The world was gentle now, the storm's fury replaced by the soft rustle of grass and the occasional buzz of a bee. For a while, nothing happened. Sam drew the line of the fence, the shape of the clouds, the impression of a hoofprint pressed deep into the wet earth. Then in the distance, she saw him. Shadow moved like something out of a dream. Careful, powerful, every muscle tensed for flight. His black coat gleamed where it wasn't streaked with mud or marred by fresh scratches. He walked with a limp, but he walked with pride. Sam held her breath, afraid even the sound might spook him. The Mustang paused, sniffing the air, eyes fixed on the apples. For a long, still moment, he stood there, wild, beautiful, untouchable. Sam didn't move. She barely dared to blink. Slowly, Shadow approached the food. Each step was a test of trust, an invisible dance. Sam kept her eyes low, pretending to be just another piece of the fence. She kept humming, a soft, steady sound in the morning quiet. Finally, Shadow stretched out his neck, lips trembling, and took the first apple, crunching it down in 2 bites. He watched her the whole time, ready to bolt if she flinched. Sam's heart soared. She stayed perfectly still, letting him decide how close to come. When he finished the apple, Shadow eyed the water jug. Sam gently nudged it closer with the toe of her boot, never reaching out her hand. The Mustang snorted, pawed at the dirt, then bent down and drank, his sides heaving. After a few minutes, Shadow moved away, disappearing back into the tall grass. Sam exhaled, shaking with relief and excitement. She sketched furiously, trying to capture every detail, his scars, the shape of his ears, the look in his eyes. She filled pages with images, her pencil moving faster than her thoughts. This became her new ritual. Every morning before sunrise, Sam snuck out with apples and water. Every day, Shadow came a little closer. He watched her from a distance at first, but each time she brought food, he ventured nearer, curiosity warring with caution. Sam never tried to touch him, never rushed the moment. She knew trust couldn't be forced. She sat quietly, drawing, humming, letting Shadow get used to her scent, her shape, her stillness. Some days he ate within a few yards of her. Other days, he only watched from the trees. Sam talked to him in a low, gentle voice, telling him about the ranch, about her dreams, about the mother she missed every day. She told him secrets she'd never spoken to anyone else, not her uncle, not Lina, not even the horses she brushed in the stable. Somehow it felt safe to share these things with a wild Mustang who had no reason to judge. In the quiet of those mornings, Sam found something she'd never felt on the ranch before. A sense of belonging, a fragile hope. Shadow was still wild, still wary, but he chose to come back, again and again. Each morning felt like a tiny miracle. For the first time since losing her mother, Sam looked forward to waking up. She felt the world crack open just a little, letting in light and possibility. Her uncle and the ranch hands didn't notice at first. They were busy repairing storm damage, arguing about lost calves, hunting for Thunderbolt, who remained missing. Sam kept her secret close. Lina eyed her with suspicion a few times but said nothing. Sam made sure to finish her chores, to act obedient, to hide the apples and sketchbook before anyone else woke up. Days passed. The distance between girl and horse closed inch by inch, built on patience and gentle routine. Sam watched Shadow's limp improve, his wounds scabbing over, his coat shining with new health. She never tried to touch him, though she longed to, never tried to tame him. Their friendship was fragile, a wordless bond, born of mutual respect. One morning, just as the sun crested the far hills, Shadow stepped close enough that Sam could see the whites of his eyes, could smell the grass on his breath. He stood for a long moment, studying her, then snorted softly, as if in approval. Sam smiled through tears she didn't quite understand. She didn't need anyone else to know. She didn't need to prove herself to the ranch hands or her uncle. Out here in the hush of morning, she was enough. She was seen. She belonged. Afternoons on Dusty Creek always felt heavy, like the sun pressed down just to see who could take it. The chores fell into a dull rhythm, mucking stalls, hauling hay, fixing the damage from the last big storm. The ranch seemed to hum with tension beneath the surface, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Sam noticed it first in the glances people gave her at breakfast. Quick, measuring looks, a touch of suspicion mixed with a sort of amused pity. She tried to ignore it, but the whispers found her anyway. They always did. "I saw her talking to herself out by the fence again," one hand said, not bothering to keep his voice down as Sam brushed past in the tack room. "Probably thinks she's part horse," another snickered, earning a round of quiet laughter. It hurt, but Sam was used to it. She'd been the weird one for so long. She wore it like an old, ill-fitting coat. What stung was that none of them knew why she was out there, why the fence line called her in the early hours. They didn't see Shadow creeping close, trusting her more with every sunrise. They didn't see the sketches, the growing pile of pages that captured the Mustang's recovery, every new muscle under his hide, every wary flick of his ear. Her uncle, Frank, was less vocal, but Sam could feel his doubts hanging between them like storm clouds. He watched her more closely now, sometimes pausing at the window while she did chores or following her with his eyes as she crossed the yard. It made her nervous, made her careful, but she wouldn't let herself stop. The secret meetings with Shadow each morning were the only thing that made the rest of the day bearable. Even Lena, who usually ignored her, began to notice. One night, as they sat at opposite ends of the long dinner table, Lena piped up in her too loud voice, "Sam, you ever gonna draw people or just horses?" Her uncle looked up over his fork, his eyes narrowing, and Sam felt a flush crawl up her neck. "I like horses," she mumbled, tracing a finger over a stain in the table's wood grain. "They don't judge." The ranch hands snickered, but Frank only grunted, returning to his meal. The silence after stung sharper than any words. Sam escaped as soon as she could, carrying her battered sketchbook to the old hayloft above the barn. This had become her sanctuary, her private world. Here, with the scent of dried grass and old leather thick in the air, she poured out everything she couldn't say. Her sketches filled page after page, Shadow standing proud on 3 legs, Shadow grazing in dawn light. Even Shadow watching the horizon with that patient, hopeful look Sam wished she could borrow. Sometimes she wrote too. Snatches of poetry, journal entries, letters to her mother she knew would never be mailed. She wrote about the ache of missing someone so much it felt like a physical wound, about the fear of not belonging, about the stubborn flicker of hope she carried with her into every new morning. The more she drew and wrote, the more she realized how much she wanted to understand Shadow. Not just as a wild creature, but as a spirit fighting for survival, the way she felt she was, too. The ranch was a place of rules and boundaries, but the world beyond the fence line was full of possibility. It was wild and terrifying and beautiful, just like the Mustang she now counted as her only true friend. The rumors on the ranch grew wilder as days passed. One hand Earl started a running joke about Sam's horse language, neighing under his breath whenever she walked by. Others claimed she was wasting time, feeding apples to ghosts, as if the Mustangs were imaginary. Frank said nothing, but his silence felt louder than their teasing. Still, Sam refused to stop. Each dawn, she crept out to the fence line, apples in her pocket and hope in her chest. Shadow was there almost every time now, his limp barely noticeable, his eyes softer when he looked at her. Sam never tried to touch him, knowing trust was a fragile thing. She simply sat, sketched, and spoke in the gentle hush between night and day. One morning, as she finished a particularly careful drawing of Shadow standing in profile, she felt a prickle on her skin, the feeling of being watched. She turned, heart leaping, and caught a glimpse of movement behind the nearest cottonwood. A figure, broad and silent, faded back into the trees. Frank. He'd seen her with Shadow, though he didn't step forward or say a word. The encounter left Sam shaken, unsure if her secret was safe. That evening, Frank said nothing, but he watched her all through dinner, eyes sharp beneath his heavy brow. Afterward, Sam retreated to her room, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. If Frank had seen the bond she'd built, maybe he'd finally understand. Maybe he'd see that the wild horses were more than a nuisance. They were survivors, just like her. She spent hours that night writing in her journal, pouring out the tangled mess of hope and worry, filling pages with questions she couldn't ask aloud. The next days blurred together. Chores, meals, sketches, early morning meetings with Shadow. The routine became its own kind of comfort. The ranch hands grew bored with their teasing, turning their attention back to the search for Thunderbolt and the endless cycle of repairs. Lena drifted back to her music and friends. Only Frank's watchful silence remained, a steady pressure Sam couldn't quite ignore. But each time she sat by the fence with Shadow, every time the Mustang led her closer, Sam's resolve grew. The world beyond Dusty Creek's fences still felt far away, but she no longer felt so small, so lost. She belonged here, at least in this quiet moment between girl and horse. One evening, as she tucked her sketchbook away and prepared for another restless night, Sam paused by the window. The moon was high, the fields awash in silver. Somewhere out there, Shadow ran free, his scars fading, his spirit unbroken. And Sam, for all her awkwardness and loneliness, felt a flicker of pride. She didn't need the approval of the ranch hands or even her uncle, not anymore. She had her art, her words, her wild friend. That was enough for now. She drifted to sleep with a soft smile, the memory of Shadow's gentle eyes chasing her into dreams, carrying her through a world apart, one where belonging was found, not given. The days drifted by, blending into each other like watercolors bleeding across a page. The ranch slowly settled back into routine after the storm. Thunderbolt was still missing, but the search parties had given up hope of finding the stallion anytime soon. Most folks chalked it up to fate. A ranch loses animals sometimes, and a storm makes a good cover for anything that might happen in the night. But for Sam, the world felt different now. Her mornings with Shadow were the bright center of each day, the secret anchor that kept her grounded when the ranch hands joked, or when the work dragged on and the loneliness felt like a heavy stone in her chest. She watched the wild Mustang grow stronger, his limp nearly gone, his coat shining with new life. Their silent bond, built on patience, sketching, and trust, remained her most precious secret. It was this new, sharpened sense of responsibility that made her notice something odd one evening as dusk settled over Dusty Creek. She had stayed late cleaning the tack room after Lena forgot her chores, the sun a faint ember behind the distant hills. The air was thick with the scent of hay and horses and coming rain. By the time Sam finished, most of the ranch hands were already gone, their laughter trailing away as they headed to the bunkhouse for cards and beer. Her uncle's truck rumbled down the dirt road to town, leaving the ranch quieter than usual, the only sounds the clatter of horses in their stalls and the wind sighing through the cottonwoods. Sam took her time walking back to the house, savoring the silence. But as she neared the edge of the wild pasture, a prickle ran down her spine. Something was off. The grass seemed too still, the birds too quiet. In the gathering darkness, she thought she heard a sound, a low rumble, not quite an engine, but not the wind either. Curiosity mixed with caution, she crouched low, slipping behind a sagging fence post and strained to listen. There, on the far side of the pasture, headlights blinked once, twice, then snapped off. Sam's heart hammered. Nobody drove out here after dark except family or troublemakers. She pressed herself flat to the ground, her breath shallow. The faint sound of voices drifted through the dusk, carried on the breeze. Sam heard laughter, sharp and mean, then a muttered curse. The words were too far away to catch, but the tone chilled her. She inched closer, careful to keep the high grass between her and the voices. At the edge of the pasture, where the wild land met the old fire road, she saw them. 3 men, all strangers except for one, a local named Wade. He had a reputation in the county for causing trouble, usually with a bottle in hand and a pack of buddies behind him. They moved in the half-dark like shadows, flashlights winking on and off as they surveyed the pasture. Sam caught a glimpse of rope, something metallic glinting. Traps, she realized, her stomach twisting with dread. The men knelt by the fence, whispering and laughing, laying out crude snares and setting up homemade traps just beyond the property line. They were after the Mustangs. Sam froze. Poachers. She'd heard stories. The wild horses of the region fetched good money on the black market, especially a black stallion like Shadow. The thought of him, strong and trusting, caught in a cruel trap, made her blood run cold. For a moment, fear rooted her to the spot. What could she do? She was just a kid, grounded and ignored, outnumbered and outmatched. But then she remembered Shadow's wounded eyes that first night, the fragile trust that had taken weeks to build. She couldn't let him down now. Sam slunk away, staying low, her mind racing. The men were too close for her to make it back to the barn unseen. She had to warn someone, fast. Her mind flashed on the old ranch bell. It was half-rusted and hardly used, hanging from the barn roof as a relic from Dusty Creek's earliest days. The hands joked about it sometimes, but the truth was, when the bell rang in the night, everyone knew something was wrong. If she could reach it, maybe she could raise the alarm before the poachers finished their work. Sam waited for the men's attention to drift, then darted back along the fence, boots barely making a sound in the soft grass. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure they'd hear. Once she was out of sight, she broke into a sprint, lungs burning, breath coming in ragged gasps. The ranch lay sprawled before her, silent except for the whinny of a horse and the distant hum of insects. She reached the barn, hands shaking as she fumbled with the latch. The world narrowed to a single point, the old bell hanging above her, thick with cobwebs and memories. She grabbed the rope, wound it twice around her fist, and yanked with all her might. The bell's first clang shattered the quiet, echoing across the fields like a thunderclap. Again. Sam pulled until her arms ached, the sound booming into the night. Inside the barn, horses kicked at their stalls, whinnying in panic. Lights flicked on in the bunkhouse. Someone shouted from the porch. Footsteps pounded across the yard. Sam darted outside, gasping for breath, just as her uncle appeared in the moonlight, shotgun in hand, followed by Chet and two other hands, all pulling on boots and buttoning shirts. "Sam, what in God's name?" Frank demanded, but Sam cut him off, voice high and urgent. "Poachers! At the wild pasture. They're setting traps. Shadow, please hurry." For a heartbeat, the men stared at her, unsure. But the desperation in her voice and the echoing clang of the bell left no room for doubt. Frank spun on his heel, barking orders. "Chet, get the truck! You two, grab flashlights and rope, move!" As they charged into the night, Sam stumbled after them, legs trembling but mind clear. She didn't care about being grounded anymore. She didn't care about the stares or the teasing or the ranch hands' jokes. All that mattered was Shadow and the other wild horses, her wild, wounded friend, caught up in a fight for his freedom. As the men raced toward the pasture, Sam heard the sound of a truck engine gunning to life and saw flashlights bouncing over the dark field. The poachers, realizing their cover was blown, shouted in alarm and vanished into the night, abandoning their traps in the panic. The air filled with chaos, shouts, the crackle of walkie-talkies, the stomp and snort of startled horses. But through it all, Sam felt a strange, steady calm. She'd done what needed to be done. She'd acted, even when it was terrifying. And as she caught a fleeting glimpse of Shadow, wild and free against the starlit sky. She knew she was part of something bigger than herself now. A protector, a voice for the wild things the world wanted to forget. The clanging of the old ranch bell shattered the calm Texas night, echoing over fields and pasture like the call of some ancient, iron-throated animal. As the last clang faded into darkness, Dusty Creek Ranch exploded into motion. Porch lights snapped on. Boots thudded down steps and across the muddy yard. Dogs barked, spooked horses kicked at their stalls, and voices, sharp with adrenaline, cut through the darkness. Sam's Uncle Frank, his face grim and shadowed in the porch light, was the first to reach her. "Sam, what's going on? Why are you ringing the bell?" he demanded, breath coming in short bursts. Sam, breathless but determined, forced out the words. "Poachers, at the wild pasture. I saw them setting traps. They've got ropes. Shadow's out there." The urgency in her voice, raw and trembling, left no room for argument. Frank didn't waste another second. "Chet, Earl, grab flashlights and meet me at the truck. Sam, stay here. No, on second thought. Chet, keep her in sight." He fumbled with his shotgun and headed for the battered Ford parked near the barn. But Sam was already running, her sneakers slipping on wet grass, lungs burning. She had to make sure Shadow was safe. Chet chased after her, cursing under his breath, but Sam was quick and desperate. She reached the pasture fence just as headlights flashed across the field, slicing through the night. The poachers, startled by the bell, were shouting and scrambling, their traps glinting in the grass. The wild horses sensed the panic. Several Mustangs bolted for the far fence, hooves pounding the earth like thunder. Sam caught sight of Shadow, his dark coat gleaming in the pickup beams, mane flying as he whirled away from the ropes. A man lunged for him, rope raised high, but Shadow wheeled, kicking out hard. The man went sprawling into the mud. Sam's heart hammered. "Shadow!" she called, as if he could understand her voice above the chaos. "Run, boy, run!" The ranch truck skidded to a stop at the pasture's edge, Frank leaping out with Earl and two other ranch hands. The men spread out, flashlights arcing, voices roaring. "Get off our land! We've called the sheriff! Move it, Wade!" The poachers, caught between the angry ranchers and the wild horses, lost their nerve. They scattered, one diving through the fence, another scrambling for the pickup parked down the fire road. Tires spun, mud flew, and in moments the pasture was clear of intruders. Only the echo of their shouts and the churned-up earth left behind. But the chaos wasn't over. The wild horses, still panicked, raced around the field. Shadow, battered but unbroken, stayed near the fence line, eyes wild and rolling. Sam, pressed against the wood slats, didn't dare move closer. Any sudden move might spook him into the traps the poachers left behind. Frank strode to her side, shotgun slung over his shoulder, eyes darting from Sam to the Mustang. "Are you hurt?" he barked. Sam shook her head, breath hitching, pointing toward Shadow and the traps. "He's hurt, his leg. There's a cut. I think it's bleeding again. The others, there's rope, metal." Frank scanned the ground with his flashlight, jaw clenched. "We'll take care of it. You stay put." But Sam couldn't stand still. As the hands fanned out to collect the abandoned traps, Sam watched Shadow. He was breathing hard, foam flecking his mouth, but he stayed close, almost as if he recognized her. Sam knelt slowly, careful not to startle him, and began humming the soft tune she'd used so many mornings before. Her voice, trembling at first, grew steadier as she sang. Something in her calm must have worked. Shadow edged closer, nostrils flaring, but didn't bolt. Frank saw it. Saw the way the wild Mustang listened, the way he seemed to draw courage from the girl kneeling in the mud. The other ranch hands paused in their work, staring in disbelief as horse and girl met eyes in the dark. "Would you look at that?" Earl muttered, flashlight beam shaking. Chet, breathless from running, let out a low whistle. "Never seen anything like it." Frank approached carefully, his big frame tense but his voice soft. "Sam, don't move too fast. He trusts you, doesn't he?" Sam nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I think he does. He just needs to know he's safe." Frank and Earl circled the nearest traps, disabling each one and piling them by the fence. Chet stood watch with the flashlight while Sam kept Shadow calm, her words little more than a whisper lost on the wind. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a shaky relief. Ranch hands and neighbors, drawn by the bell, arrived in trucks and on foot, forming a loose semicircle around the pasture. The air buzzed with questions, anger, and disbelief. "Did they get any of our horses?" "You sure you're all right, Sam?" "Never thought I'd see poachers brave enough to hit Dusty Creek." As the last of the traps were cleared, Shadow stamped the ground, tossing his head, still wary but no longer frantic. He limped, favoring his injured leg, but refused to run. Sam stayed by the fence, humming, heart in her throat, every muscle tense. Frank knelt beside her, resting a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Sam. You saved the whole herd tonight, maybe more. Don't let anyone tell you different." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The wild horse, the girl, the men with their flashlights and muddy boots. Under the stars and the fading echo of the bell, a new kind of understanding flickered into life. Sam wasn't just the weird kid, the dreamer, the city girl who didn't belong. Tonight, she was part of something bigger. She was a protector. She was a hero. Gradually, the Mustangs settled, gathering near the far fence as if sensing the danger had passed. The ranch hands inspected the pasture for any sign of the poacher's return. Voices lower now, touched with something like respect. Frank called the sheriff, reporting the break-in and giving a description of Wade's truck. For the first time, nobody dismissed Sam's warnings. No one rolled their eyes at her stories. Instead, they listened, nodding, the lines of suspicion and doubt on their faces replaced by something new. As the last flashlight beams faded and the trucks rumbled off back to the ranch house, Sam stayed behind a moment, watching Shadow melt into the tall grass. For the first time in weeks, her fear was gone. All that was left was a quiet pride, a feeling that she'd finally, truly found her place. Not just with the wild horses, but with her family, her community, and herself. She headed home, exhausted but happy, the sound of the old ranch bell still ringing in her ears. Whatever happened next, she knew things would never be the same. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when the ranch came alive again. But this time the air was different. The chaos from the night before still hung around, a low hum of voices, tire tracks carved into the dirt, and the distant sound of a sheriff's cruiser rolling up the long drive. Sam stood just outside the barn, mud still caked on her jeans, her hair tangled from wind and sweat, a dull ache running through every muscle. She didn't care. After what she'd been through with Shadow and the poachers, nothing else seemed to matter, except making sure everyone understood what had really happened. The whole ranch seemed to gather in the yard, curiosity and adrenaline mixing in the cold morning air. The sheriff, a heavy-set man named Ortiz, questioned Frank and the ranch hands, taking notes about the poachers, the traps, the bell. But it wasn't the sheriff's questions that everyone waited for. It was the story, Sam's story. Frank finally called her over, his voice loud enough for the assembled crowd. "Sam, you were the one who found those men last night. You want to tell us what you saw?" Sam hesitated, Heart thudding, a dozen faces turned her way. Chet, Earl, Lana, even the youngest stable hand, all waiting. She swallowed hard, but there was a different energy in the air. No one looked at her with the usual smirks or rolled eyes. No one called her the horse whisperer or the dreamer. They just waited. Sam took a deep breath, digging her fingernails into her palm to steady herself. "It started with the storm a few nights ago," she began, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "I heard something out by the fence, the wild Mustang, the black one we call Shadow. He was trapped by coyotes. I scared them off, but he was hurt." She glanced at Frank, then at the sheriff. "I kept checking on him every morning. He let me get close, closer than any horse ever has. Last night I saw headlights and voices. Wade and some others, setting traps for the wild horses. I used the bell because I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't let them hurt Shadow, or any of the others." She trailed off, staring at the ground, waiting for the laughter, the snide remarks. But none came. Instead, the silence stretched, deep and full of something she'd never felt here before: respect. Frank spoke first. "What you did was dangerous, Sam, but you saved our herd, and the wild ones too." He looked out over the ranch hands, his voice ringing with a new kind of authority. "None of us saw the signs. None of us listened. But Sam did." Earl cleared his throat, shuffling his boots. "Didn't know you had it in you, kid." That was quick thinking. Even Chet, usually the loudest critic, nodded. "I've been on this land 30 years and never seen a Mustang trust a human like that. Not even close." Sam's cheeks burned, but this time it wasn't shame. It was pride, raw and unfamiliar. The sheriff took notes, then turned to Sam. "You did good, kid. Most folks would have run for help and never come back. You stood your ground." He looked at Frank. "You got a brave one here." Frank placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, his grip gentle but strong. "We do." Sam felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as an outsider, but as part of something real. The ranch hands, one by one, offered a nod, a smile. Even a few murmured apologies for all the teasing and suspicion. Lena, arms crossed, looked away but didn't roll her eyes, which for her was the closest thing to acceptance. After the sheriff left, Frank gathered everyone on the porch. The early sun turned the yard gold, dew glittering on the grass. "We owe Sam more than thanks," he said. "From now on, her word about the horses carries weight. If she says something's wrong, we listen." There were a few murmurs, but no one disagreed. That afternoon, Sam helped the hands dismantle the remaining traps and check the fences. For once, she wasn't shooed away or ignored. Chet asked her opinion about hoofprints. Earl let her carry the toolbox, and even Lana followed quietly, as if hoping to witness another miracle. Later, when the chores were done, Sam slipped away to her usual spot at the wild pasture fence. Shadow was there waiting, his coat shining in the sunlight, the wound on his leg nearly healed. He watched her with that same cautious intelligence, head high, ears flicked forward. Sam sat on the fence, sketchbook in her lap, and began to draw. As the pencil moved, she thought about everything that had happened: the fear, the danger, the rescue, and the moment when, for the first time, people truly listened. Her hand trembled as she drew Shadow's eyes, wide and bright and full of wild trust. She realized she'd changed too. She wasn't the quiet, scared outsider anymore. She was part of this land, its struggles and its hope. A shadow fell across her page and Sam looked up to find Frank standing nearby, his hat in his hands. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, softer than she'd ever heard him. Sam shook her head, sliding over to make room. They sat together in silence, watching Shadow graze. After a while, Frank spoke. "I misjudged you, Sam. I thought you were just lost. But you see things the rest of us miss. Your mama would be proud." Sam swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Thanks, Uncle Frank. I didn't want to let him down. Or you." Frank squeezed her shoulder. "You didn't. You brought us all together. You made us better." They sat in companionable silence as the sun dipped low, painting the pasture in amber light. The wild horses drifted closer, drawn by some invisible thread. Sam realized that trust wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned, step by patient step, just like with Shadow. As dusk settled, the ranch hands called Sam in for supper, their voices friendlier, less guarded than ever before. Sam lingered one last moment, committing the scene to memory. Shadow at the fence, the sky ablaze with color, her uncle beside her. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Sam thought of all the ways things had changed. She'd found courage she didn't know she had. She'd earned respect. Most of all, she'd found a place. Not just beside the wild horses, but at Dusty Creek, with her family and her future. And somewhere out in the fields, Shadow called softly to the night. A song of freedom, survival, and new beginnings. The change didn't happen all at once. It began with little things. A new sense of respect in the way the ranch hands spoke to Sam, her uncle's lingering glances of pride, and the way Lena's attitude softened, just a little, whenever Sam talked about the horses. It was as if the night of the alarm had peeled away a layer of doubt, revealing a deeper current of trust and possibility at Dusty Creek. But the biggest change came a few days after the Poachers' scare, when Frank called a meeting out on the porch at sundown. The whole crew gathered, Chet and Earl in their dust-streaked hats, Lena perched on the railing, a few neighbors who'd come to help with the last repairs. Sam, caught by surprise, stood at the edge of the group, not sure if she should speak or just listen. Frank's voice cut through the evening hush. "We nearly lost more than horses last week," he said, looking at Sam, then at the ranch hands. "We nearly lost our reputation. This ranch has always stood for something. I think it's time we stood for something more." Chet scratched his chin. "You mean letting wild horses run through our pastures, Frank?" Frank nodded. "Yeah, and making sure nobody tries to take them again." He paused, searching Sam's face. "I want Sam to help oversee the wild herd's safety. She sees things the rest of us miss." There was a long silence, broken only by the buzzing of crickets and the faint sound of Shadow whinnying from across the field. Earl grunted, then shrugged. "Sounds good to me. I figure she knows him better than anybody." Sam felt a lump rise in her throat. For a moment she couldn't speak. She just nodded, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. That night, she stayed up late, researching everything she could find about Mustang conservation and ranch protections. The library's old computer flickered as she read articles, took notes, and mapped out ideas. She found numbers for local wildlife organizations and drafted a letter, her first real proposal, asking for advice on humane fencing, wildlife cameras, and even setting up a community watch. By morning, Sam was ready. Over pancakes and eggs, she pitched her ideas to Frank, who listened without interruption, even taking notes. Lina, half awake but curious, asked questions about how cameras worked. Chet offered to weld new locks for the pasture gates. Earl said he'd help set up motion lights along the fence. As the days passed, Sam's project gained momentum. Frank called a meeting with the local sheriff and a handful of conservationists who drove out from the nearest town. Sam stood in front of the crew, her hands shaking at first, then growing steadier as she spoke about Shadow, the poachers, and the importance of keeping the Mustangs free and safe. Her voice rang out clear and strong in the barn, and for the first time, people listened without doubting her. The ranch transformed. Together, they installed trail cameras along the wild pasture, checked them every morning for new tracks and suspicious activity. Chet's locks made it harder for outsiders to slip through the gates at night. Frank drafted a flyer about the new Wild Horse Sanctuary program, which they posted at the feed store and community center, inviting other ranchers to join their efforts. Lena volunteered to set up a page on the local social network, sharing photos of Shadow and the herd, hoping to inspire donations and volunteers. Sam found herself busier than she'd ever been, moving between the fields and the kitchen, the computer and the fence lines. She met with the conservationists, soaking up every word as they explained ways to balance ranching with wildlife protection. They taught her how to recognize horse tracks, how to use non-lethal deterrents for predators, and how to keep the pastures healthy for both the wild and the tame. For the first time, Sam felt not just needed, but valued. She wasn't the outcast anymore. She was the one people came to for advice. The one who led morning patrols along the fence. The one who wrote updates in the ranch journal every night. Even Lina tagged along some mornings, snapping photos of the Mustangs with her phone, catching candid shots of Shadow as he nuzzled the grass or raced across the open field. But it wasn't just the ranch that changed. Word spread throughout the county. Dusty Creek Ranch was now a place where wild horses could run safe, where a quiet, stubborn girl and a black Mustang had stood up against poachers and won. More neighbors stopped by to ask about the sanctuary program. Local kids, some who had once teased Sam in town, now came out on weekends to help refill water troughs and collect apples from the orchard to feed the horses. For the first time, Sam found herself at the center of something bigger than her own pain or loneliness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the pastures in gold, Sam walked the fence line with Frank. Shadow trailed at a distance, his silhouette bold against the horizon. Frank, usually so gruff and reserved, cleared his throat and spoke softly. "I never thought I'd see this ranch change so much, Sam. Or me, for that matter. I reckon your mama would be proud, real proud, of what you've done here." Sam smiled, the old ache in her chest easing a little. "Thanks, Uncle Frank. I just wanted them to be safe. I wanted us to be safe, too." He nodded. "You made it happen. You found a way to bring everyone together." He paused, looking at her in the soft light. "You know, for a long time I thought being strong meant not changing. But I see now real strength is standing up for what matters, even when it's hard." They stood in silence for a while, watching Shadow and the other Mustangs graze peacefully. In that moment, Sam felt a deep sense of belonging. She was no longer the outsider, no longer lost in the crowd or overshadowed by grief. She was a champion for the wild, a leader on the ranch, and, maybe best of all, a friend to a horse who had once been just a legend in the dark. The ranch, too, had changed. Dusty Creek had become a place where the wild and the weary, the old-timers and the outcasts, all found their place. And Sam, for the first time in her life, knew she was home. The weeks following the night of the Poachers and the beginning of Dusty Creek's Wild Horse Sanctuary brought a subtle but powerful transformation, not just to the ranch, but to everyone who called it home. There was a new energy in the air, one that replaced suspicion with curiosity, and skepticism with respect. For Sam, each morning was still anchored in routine: the early walk to the pasture fence, the soft call to Shadow and the Mustangs, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they were safe. But now she wasn't alone. Sometimes Lena joined her, snapping photos for the ranch's new online page. Occasionally, Chet or Earl wandered out before dawn, leaning on the fence, quietly asking questions about the Mustang's habits. Even kids from town, once eager to snicker at the weird horse girl, now came out, eager to learn and to help. The wild horses flourished. Shadow, fully recovered, had become a symbol of hope not only for Sam, but for the entire community. His wild, regal presence drew in new visitors, and as more people saw him up close, the old stories about Mustangs being worthless strays started to fade. Now people called them survivors, even teachers. Their freedom was not a threat, but an inspiration. Sam's uncle, Frank, changed too. He was never one for big speeches, but his actions spoke louder than words ever could. He listened to Sam, really listened, not just about the horses, but about everything else too. Sometimes in the evenings, he'd sit with her on the porch, sharing stories about Sam's mother, about the hard years after she passed, and about his own regrets. One golden afternoon, as they watched the Mustangs graze, Frank cleared his throat and said, "You know, Sam, I always thought courage looked like a man with a gun, or someone shouting orders in a storm. But I was wrong. Real courage is quiet, patient. It's doing the right thing when no one's watching and when everyone doubts you." Sam glanced at him, surprised. Frank looked away, but his voice was steady. "I judged you, Sam. I let everyone else's opinions color my own. You proved me wrong, and I'm grateful you did." He gave a small, gruff smile. "You remind me of your mother. She saw things in people, good things, hidden things, when nobody else bothered to look." That conversation echoed in Sam's mind as she wrote in her journal that night. She'd always felt like she needed to be loud or bold to be strong. Now, watching Shadow's patient leadership over the Mustang herd and seeing how slow trust could change even the hardest hearts, she understood something deeper. Sometimes the strongest people are the quietest. Sometimes kindness is a revolution. The ranch hands, too, seemed to change. There was less teasing in the bunkhouse, fewer careless jokes at her expense. When new kids or volunteers came to help with the horses, it was Sam they turned to for instruction. She found herself growing more confident with each day, no longer afraid to speak her mind or share her ideas. The impact rippled into the broader community. Dusty Creek Ranch's transformation became a story at the feed store and at the church social. Ranchers from nearby counties visited, some skeptical at first, but most leaving impressed. The sheriff stopped by now and then, making sure the poachers didn't return, but also because he liked hearing about the sanctuary's progress. Teachers invited Sam to speak at the local school about the Mustangs and what she'd learned. At one of these talks, Sam stood in front of a classroom, hands trembling at first. She looked at the faces, some familiar, some not, and told the story of Shadow, of the night she faced down coyotes and poachers, and of the slow work of building trust. She talked about her mother, about loneliness, and about how sometimes the quiet ones are the bravest. The kids listened, really listened, and afterwards a shy boy approached her and whispered, "I want to help too." Those words stayed with her. It became clear to Sam that leadership wasn't about power or being in charge. It was about caring enough to do what was right, even when it was hard. It was about giving others a chance to be brave too. The adults noticed too. Even Chet, gruff as he was, stopped Sam one afternoon as she cleaned out the tack room. You know, I used to think you were just different, he said, rubbing his neck awkwardly. But now I see that was the best thing about you. He grinned, sheepish. Keep showing us how it's done, kid. The real lesson began to settle across the ranch and the town. Don't judge by surface impressions. Every person has strengths that aren't always obvious. Sometimes it takes hardship, a storm, a lost horse, a danger in the dark, for those strengths to shine. And sometimes, the ones who seem the most different have exactly what the world needs. Sam wrote that lesson down one evening, watching the sunset with Lena beside her, both girls silent, content. True courage is often quiet and patient, not loud and brash. Judging others by surface impressions can blind us to hidden strengths. Sometimes, leadership and compassion come from the least expected places. Her uncle saw her scribbling in her journal and asked, "What's that for?" Sam smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep inside. "Just writing down what I want to remember," she replied. "So I don't forget how much things can change if you give them the chance." Lena, once the eye-rolling skeptic, nudged her. "You should read that at the next community meeting. People need to hear it from you." Sam nodded. Maybe she would. The days continued, full of work, hope, and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats in the grass. Shadow came and went, always free, always returning to Sam's call. And all around them, the world seemed just a little kinder, a little braver, because one girl and one wild Mustang refused to give up on each other. With the turning of the season, Dusty Creek Ranch settled into a new kind of normal, a normal where wild horses roamed safely, where new faces showed up to help, and where people lingered a little longer under the big Texas sky, talking not just about cattle prices or the weather, but about hope, trust, and second chances. Sam found herself at the heart of these changes. She'd grown from the shy, overlooked girl in the corner into someone others turned to for guidance and reassurance. She was surprised by how natural it felt, how the things that once made her feel different or too quiet became her greatest strengths. Her mornings still started with the soft glow of dawn and the low hum of Mustangs grazing. But now she was often joined by others, kids from the community, volunteers from nearby ranches, and even her Uncle Frank, who had become her greatest supporter. The Mustang Sanctuary Project blossomed. The ranch's new reputation spread quickly. People brought food, supplies, and donations. Conservationists offered workshops and support, and local media stopped by to interview Sam and her family. One article in the county newspaper titled, "Quiet Girl, Wild Horses, Big Change," sparked even more interest. Dusty Creek became a model for other ranches across the region, proof that tradition and compassion could work hand in hand. The school invited Sam to return as a guest speaker, this time to a packed auditorium. She wore her best jeans and a crisp white shirt, Lina braiding her hair that morning as a show of support. Frank drove her into town and waited in the back row, arms folded across his chest, eyes suspiciously bright. Sam took the stage, her voice clear and steady. Sometimes the world expects strength to look a certain way, loud, bold, always in charge. But I learned that quiet strength matters too. Kindness is its own kind of courage. When we listen to each other, when we give someone a second chance, when we protect what's wild and beautiful instead of trying to control it, we all become stronger. She finished her talk with a story about Shadow, the wild Mustang who had taught her patience, resilience, and trust. He comes and goes as he pleases, but he always comes back. Not because he has to, but because he chooses to. I think that's what trust really means. I hope everyone finds their own shadow, a challenge that makes you braver, a friend who reminds you who you are. The auditorium erupted in applause, and afterwards, a line of students and parents came to ask questions, to thank her, or simply to say how much her words meant. Even a few teachers wiped away tears. Lena, standing nearby, whispered, "You were amazing, Sam. You changed the way people see everything." Back at the ranch, life was busier and brighter. The wild horses, once seen as a nuisance, were now beloved, part of the ranch's identity. Sam coordinated volunteer days, helped design educational pamphlets, and even started a small fund for vet care and sanctuary improvements. Kids who had once made fun of her for being different now asked to help with feeding, fencing, or simply watching the Mustangs run at sunset. Frank, meanwhile, kept his promise to support the program. He became an advocate for wild horse protection at local meetings, often quoting Sam's words about quiet courage. He even shared memories of Sam's mother, how she had believed in the power of kindness, how she'd once rescued a stray dog from a flood, how she'd told Frank that some hearts need open skies to heal. Shadow, the legendary Mustang, continued to roam free. He never stayed in the same place for long, but he always returned to the ranch, often appearing just when Sam needed reassurance or inspiration. Sometimes he came alone. Sometimes he led the herd. He remained wild and untamed, a symbol of freedom, strength, and the bond between outcasts who found family in each other. As the years passed, the story of Dusty Creek Ranch became something larger than just one family or one place. Other ranches began their own sanctuary programs. Some kids, inspired by Sam's journey, started wildlife clubs or wrote essays about the value of kindness. Sam kept in touch with conservationists and local leaders, always eager to learn more and do more. At home, the changes were more subtle, but even more important. Frank and Sam found a new rhythm, built on understanding and trust. Lina stopped rolling her eyes every time Sam mentioned the horses. Instead, she began sketching, learning from her cousin how to capture the Mustang's grace and energy with a pencil. Chet and Earl, once skeptical, became enthusiastic volunteers, telling visitors the story of the wild black Mustang and the girl who wouldn't give up. Some evenings, Sam would walk the pasture fence, pausing as dusk settled over the fields. If she was lucky, Shadow would appear at the far edge, watching her with those deep, intelligent eyes. Sometimes he came close enough that she could whisper a greeting, and for a moment, their worlds touched. A bridge between the wild and the human, built on nothing but trust and quiet love. She always ended her day writing in her journal, recording the lessons, the small victories, and even the setbacks. The ranch still faced challenges, occasional storms, the constant work of maintenance, the worries that come with caring for living things. But now Sam faced those challenges with a sense of purpose she'd never known before. One evening, as a golden light poured over the grass, Sam sat on the porch, pen in hand, Lana beside her, Frank tuning his old guitar in the background. She wrote a message she hoped would live beyond the ranch, beyond her own story. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes, the people you overlook have the courage to change everything. Sometimes, a wild horse just needs a chance to show its strength. Who in your life might be waiting for their chance to show what they're made of? Don't turn away. Listen. Encourage. That's how legacies are built. As the stars came out and the land settled into its nighttime hush, Sam felt at peace. The ranch was still wild, still challenging, but it was also full of kindness. A place where outcasts and Mustangs, old hands and newcomers, could all find a home. And somewhere in the darkness, Shadow ran free. A living promise that, with trust and a little courage, anything was possible. Underscore, 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 underscore. Thank you for reading The Outcast and the Wild Mustang. If this story moved you, remember to like and follow for more tales of hope, courage, and second chances. Every story leaves a legacy. Let's build ours together.